If you're watching this video, it means that you have made it to my Lord of the Rings retrospective. In this 6-part video series, we will be abducting and analyzing footage from every Lord of the Rings movie in 10-minute segments, because the YouTube gods were very mad and they would not let me upload an hour and 11-minute video about Lord of the Rings. So, over the next few days, I will be uploading each segment of Lord of the Rings to this channel. Each of them a review and transformative in nature, falling under the Copyright Protection Act of 1976, but, you know, YouTube doesn't like that, so I'm still angry about it, but there's no reason to be, so, I guess, enjoyed this video about the Fellowship of the Ring. This movie is a masterpiece. 10 out of 10. I'll talk about this film, I guess. This film is really mastery of a very particular craft that is undisputed as one of the greatest films of all time. That's how good this is. However, this film does feel like it's the oldest, I guess. You should be very familiar with this movie, and it's really just a classic. This movie is paced extremely slowly, but it is still consistent, and is a perfect example of a slow burn. However, this movie opens with a prologue that is really necessary. I hate a lot of movies that start with a lot of exposition, but Galadriel's monologue is paired with fast imagery that strikes the viewer, with little to no shots that don't please. It really well explains how the Rings of Power have power over their bearers. Most of the movies start with a very cool opening, but this is the best. Lord of the Rings is a movie where they walk to a mountain for like 12 hours, so it really has to give you a rush of pure action. At this point, we already have some knowledge of what the ring is, but this intro really makes you understand how much power it controls. After the prologue, I will mention, I watched pretty much only the extended edition, but that's not for everybody. If I talk about a scene that you don't remember, I'm likely talking about the extended edition. Because Bilbo's monologue concerning hobbits is one of my favorite moments in the entire film, I might talk about, like, extended scenes a little bit if it's important to the video's construction. The great lines in the monologue, coupled with Howard Shore's incredible score, is enough to make me smile, and on revisit with context of Return of the King, make me tear up. In The Hobbit 1, we see Frodo just before Lord of the Rings begins, and that's also making me feel some feelings that make me sad. But basically, it's just this one shot from Bilbo's monologues that gives me chill every time.
For all hobbits share a love of things that grow.
Dog, that's like happiness and stuff. So, it's Bilbo's 111th birthday, and he is having the biggest party and celebration that the Shire has ever seen. Everyone's showing up, even Ian McKellen cosplaying as Gandalf. Anyway, big party, Bilbo puts on the literal one ring to rule them all as a joke, and then goes home. He fights over the ring with Gandalf, but, you know, gives it up. So I felt the need to talk about the beginning because it's a really perfect, opening for setting up the film. Anyway, I'm not going to break the rest of the movie down because it's like a 4-hour movie, and that shit is not possible. But there's still enough to speak about. For example, I really like the Fellowship, and they bounce off of each other pretty well. I really enjoy Boromir, played by Sean Bean, and his redemption in the end is really good. It's not a redemption arc, it's just a redemption, which is really creative with how it plays it. It's not how the book ends, and the thing is, Boromir dies in the beginning of the Two Towers in the book. And I should also mention that the book isn't that enjoyable of a read. It's super long, and the pacing is kind of awful. For example, by page 100, they're still in the fucking Shire. Also, the prologue is 33 pages long. This text is weirdly small as well, which is pretty hard to read. But the way that the text is handled, one being adapted to film, is one of the best and most true adaptations of a book that I have ever personally seen. Fellowship of the Ring is also a masterpiece of a slow burn, as I touched on earlier. The way that you kind of understand what a slow burn is by watching how long the scenes or sequences are. An example of this film from recent times to understand slow burns are the two first acts of Tar. The cuts can be very few and far between, and some cuts can be multiple minutes long. You don't see this in Fellowship because it knows what kind of movie it is and never lets a shot linger for too long unless it's to build tension, which the film also loves to do. This movie could have become the most bloated film ever because it thought the shots were so good that they deserved a long time on screen. Tar has incredible shots, and shots that need to linger for long periods for the story. But Fellowship is super well shot, but it knows its place as a fantasy movie and lets the good shots stay for as long as it works. Now, more about Fellowship. This is the only film that we get to see Galadriel and Elrond, I wanted to quickly mention, they butcher these two characters in the Rings of Power series. They make them completely different. Like, keep this in mind. Galadriel is one of the most powerful of the Elf Valar ever. And she's so powerful, in fact, that she literally can't leave Lothlorien because she is too incapable of it. And in Rings of Power, she's like an adventuring nomad. Elrond in this movie is one of the most fierce war generals and understands the danger of war. He's like just gay in the show. We also get one of the best ensemble roles ever. Elijah Wood as Frodo, Sean Astin as Sam, Sean Bean as Boromir, Viggo Mortensen as Aragorn, Orlando Bloom as Legolas, John Rhys-Davies as Gimli, Dominic Monaghan and Billy Boyd as Merry and Pippin. This group of the 9 of the strongest and smallest are the Fellowship of the Ring. They need to bring the strongest and most powerful ring to the fiery Southlands, known as Mordor, as the orc versus man war makes that harder. So they walk to a mountain for like 10 hours, but it is truly some of the most entertaining 10 hours of my life. And the fact that the common fantasy hero isn't the main character is wild, giving the role to the smallest person with the largest burden. Fellowship was one of the most important films ever made, and it is so influential on the modern medium. Just like how 2001 was how the sci-fi genre was started, fantasy hadn't really existed as much as a film medium before Fellowship of the Ring. You might comment that due to the popularity of Harry Potter, the previous statement is incorrect. However, the book was released in the... that was what had influenced the genre. Harry Potter is also akin to Lord of the Rings, so go figure what influenced the series. Lord of the Rings jump-started the fantasy genre in the media of the 1950s, but it is true that Harry Potter started the film fantasy genre with the help of Peter Jackson's interpretation. Fellowship of the Ring is a perfect example of this jumpstart. Fellowship is the most fantastical film out of the trilogy, and in the video by the Cosmonaut Variety Hour, he states that this movie is very D&D, and I fully agree, but there is a flaw in the statement. In my experience playing D&D, this is not how we would play. We would probably curse more. The whole Fellowship, who I mentioned earlier, bounces off of each other flawlessly, and in some cases their chemistry is one of the best things about the movie. This movie toys with everything that's unknown to the Hobbit main character, and everything is really interesting. The whole thing is so cool on the first watch, and that's where the movie is slightly flawed. This movie is pretty much perfect, and is one of the greatest films ever made, I know. But there's one thing that bugs me. I have seen this movie way too many times. I know, it's stupid, it's petty, but think about it. How many times have you seen the first Harry Potter film? Harry Potter is a series about magic, and the first one is an introduction to such a magical world, and it's so magical the first time you watch it. Now think about Fellowship, a film that is perfect example of someone not knowing anything and being introduced to it as he goes. Now, the thing is, the introduction is something I've seen so many times. Sadly, the new magic has worn off, but that doesn't mean it's bad. It actually makes it the same. It becomes familiar, and the nostalgia makes coming back with all the others cool. The thing is just so cool, and the scenes in Moria are some of the coolest action scenes I have ever seen, and they only get better. The first sequence in the mines is really well done, even if you know Frodo doesn't die. The chase of the goblins is incredible, and a feat of digital effects for the year 2001. However, the pinnacle of the sequence is at the scene at the bridge of Khazad-dûm. Gandalf's quote-unquote sacrifice is one of the coolest scenes and most memorable scenes in the film.
You shall not pass!
The whole thing is just chef's kiss. The scenes at Lothlorien are also super cool. The whole movie is just cool. I like this movie, couldn't you tell? And the music is incredible. Howard Shore has made it a score so iconic that it rivals Star Wars and Harry Potter, and in some cases, the music is just as good. Howard Shore is an extremely versatile artist, from Lord of the Rings to Seven, and I think I should say a little bit more before we move on, and that's that I got the pleasure of seeing the film recently at the Radio City Music Hall with a live orchestra, and it was incredible. The movie is so full of content and creativity, and there was an uproar of applause every time someone said iconic, so every 5 seconds. Howard Shore's score is one of the most incredible and amazing soundtracks of all time, and the pieces are so good that I listen to them on my playlist along with Nirvana. This film has so much to offer and creates a setting that I'm always so excited to revisit, and it's entirely fair to say that this is one of my favorite movies of all time. Now, I should stop talking about this first movie, but it is still super fun and amazing, however many times as I watch it, and I guess that's that. 9.5 out of 10. Out of all of the films in this trilogy, this is the worst one. Not saying that it's bad, it's one of the best ones entirely, but the thing is, this film is definitely not the same, and it's a lot different in whimsy and such. But you can tell that there was a swift change in tone. For one, this film is a lot more gray, I guess. The coloring just takes a leap off of Gondor's tower. This doesn't really change in Return of the King, but it works there as opposed to the rest of the two towers, specifically in Osgiliath. Another problem is the pacing in this film. We have one of the greatest battles in cinematic history, and then we have Merry and Pippin talking to trees while on LSD. This film really suffers in the extended edition, something that I would only say for this one. However, with how I may attack this film, it is iconic. This movie is phenomenal, and it has probably the greatest action set piece of all time. The Battle of Helm's Deep is one of the most creative and interesting battles of any fantasy film. Helm's Deep is important this way because it understands how humans work and how they end up winning the battle. They earn it. Throughout the harsh battle, we have moments of levity, and in a future video, I would like to talk about how Marvel doesn't understand the levity of Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings began the idea of harsh and deadly battles having moments of humor. However, that has become twisted in recent years, with things such as big CGI action set pieces that would be traumatizing for anybody, making big slapstick humor that have a certain level of tonal whiplash. Lord of the Rings understands that it isn't the beaches of Normandy and Saving Private Ryan. Specifically, if the battle was a brutal bloodfest with no levity, the cuts back to Merry and Pippin would actually make the movie worse. So Jackson added in levity, counting kills, surfing on a shield, I need you to throw me, they all fit in somewhat to the actual pace of the film. As I mentioned previously, the battle will frequently cut back to Merry and Pippin. These cuts are used as levity, as the jokes are, but they feel less connected. The jokes are fine, though. They don't make me laugh as much, but whatever, I'm not too picky about it. And also, the Ride of the Rohirrim is genuinely such a cool scene. Like, they've built up so much, fought so hard, and then Gandalf shows up and you're like, hell yeah! It's fair to say that The Two Towers is equally as fantastic as Fellowship, even if for a few shortcomings. This movie has flaws, but I think it was the only way that this movie could have been made. Let me explain. Fellowship is a book that was written very well to be directed into a film. I don't know why, that's just how it works. The book flows pretty well together, all things considered. However, The Two Towers book is very much the second act. Two Towers is written so that in the first half, Boromir dies, and we see what Aragorn and Merry and Pippin are doing. Then, Helm's Deep happens at the midpoint of the book, not the climax. Then, in the second half, we see Frodo and Gollum stuff, and the book climaxes in the Cave of Shelob. When you adapt that into a movie, you have to have a powerful and visionary climax. However, if there are two climaxes, Helm's Deep and Frodo getting stabbed, it creates a tough situation. In this scenario, we know that Helm's Deep has to happen in the Two Towers, but Frodo, who's not really doing much in the climax, needs to have something to do. So they solve this by Helm's Deep and the Ride of the Rohirrim happening simultaneously, with Frodo going to Osgiliath and having a character moment. It goes well that instead of two climaxes, we find something for Frodo and Sam to do, and that thing has to be really powerful and really good. Frodo's beginning to slip due to the power of the ring, and Sam has to be there to balance it out. I really like the relationship with Frodo and Gollum as well, and how Frodo up until this point is like, let's kill that bitch, up until he looks Gollum in the eyes and sees what the ring does.
What zero pussy does to a motherfucker.
You seriously feel bad for Gollum, and his story arc really works for the film, and the subtle realization that doing the right thing will only ever cause him harm is pretty heartbreaking. But my favorite part of this film, by far, is Gandalf. Well, technically it's Helm's Deep, but Gandalf's a part of that. This movie stands out as one of the most engaging and impressive adaptations of Tolkien's legendary work. One of the most impressive aspects of Two Towers is the visual effects. The breathtaking landscapes of Middle-earth, such as like the towering mountains, vast fields, and deep forests, are incredibly realistic and immersive. The battle scenes, especially the climactic Battle of Helm's Deep, is masterfully choreographed and executed, creating an intense and unforgettable cinematic experience. The performances of the cast are exceptional, with each character being brought to life in a unique and unforgettable way. Ian McKellen's portrayal of Gandalf is, as I said, one of the highlights of the film, as he conveys the character's wisdom and power with an effortless grace. The dynamic between the hobbits Frodo and Sam is also a standout, with Elijah Wood and John Astin delivering performances that are both touching and powerful. The storyline of the Two Towers is both compelling and also intricate. It builds up on the events of the first film while introducing new characters and plot twists that keep the audience engaged and on the edge of their seats. The themes of friendship, sacrifice, and power of good versus evil are explored with a depth and richness that is rare in modern cinema. But instead keeps the momentum and tension building throughout the entire runtime. Finally, The Two Towers is a testament to the power of Tolkien's source material. Jackson and his team took great care in adapting the books to the screen, honoring the story's themes, characters, and settings, while still creating a visually stunning and emotionally impactful film. Two Towers is a cinematic masterpiece that is both entertaining and thought-provoking. I should interrupt myself here because I keep saying that it's a cinematic masterpiece, but in reality, it still does have flaws, but it is one of the films that deserves to be remembered as one of the greatest movies of all time. And you know what? Fuck it! We're talking about Helm's Deep again. The Battle of Helm's Deep is one of the most iconic and thrilling scenes in Lord of the Rings, and it is a testament to the film's masterful storytelling and visual effects. From the moment the Uruk-hai army begins its assault on the fortresses of Helm's Deep, the tension and excitement never let up. The VFX used to create the army's explosions and the fight choreography are all top-notch, creating a realistic and thrilling experience that puts the audience right in the middle of the battle. One of the most impressive aspects of the battle is the way that it captures the chaos and confusion of real warfare. There are moments where the audience cannot tell who is winning, with the defenders of Helm's Deep pushed to their limits and the enemy forces appearing to be unstoppable. This adds to the sense of danger and urgency, keeping the audience invested and engaged throughout the battle. The Battle of Helm's Deep is also notable for the way that it showcases courage and determination of the defenders. Characters like Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli all have their moments to shine, taking on multiple enemies and fighting against impossible odds. This film doesn't shy away from the brutality of the battle either, with many of the characters getting wounded or killed in the fighting. Despite the intensity and violence of the battle, there are also many moments of hope and inspiration. When the arrival of Gandalf and the Rohirrim army turns the tide of the battle, it's triumphant, and it inspires the characters and the audience. The film's themes of friendship, loyalty, and, yes, the powers of good and evil are all brought to the forefront during the Battle of Helm's Deep, making it a pivotal moment in the film's narrative. Overall, Helm's Deep is a masterclass in action filmmaking. With its stunning effects, intense choreography, and powerful moments, it is a scene that is both thrilling and resonant. It is a highlight of Two Towers and stands as one of, if not the greatest battle scene in cinematic history. Overall, it's still one of the greatest movies of all time, and I love it. Again, it does have flaws, and those flaws can be spotted all over, but in any case, this movie is just so good. Some say that this is the best Lord of the Rings movie, and I don't fully agree, but I sympathize with the thought. In any case, 9 out of 10. Let's finish this trilogy up.
Legend tells of a ring created by an ancient evil that gave its wearer the power to enslave the world. Sauron needs only this ring to cover all the lands in a second darkness.
But Sauron was destroyed.
No. Sauron has returned.
Middle-earth stands upon the brink of destruction. You will unite or you will fall.
Anyway, you need people of intelligence on this sort of mission. Quest. Thing.
Well, that rules you out, Pip.
The age of men is over. The time of the orc has come.
Here's where I repeat every point I've made so far. This movie is full of payoff. The Lord of the Rings: The Return of the King is a masterpiece, and it concludes the epic tale of Frodo and his companions in a way that is both breathtaking and emotionally satisfying. This film is a true cinematic achievement, showing incredible performances, stunning visuals, and a powerful story that has resonated with audiences around the world. It is 4 hours and 23 minutes long. Now we should talk about its incredible cast. From Elijah Wood, Ian McKellen, Sean Astin, all of the actors in this movie bring the characters to life in a way that is deeply moving. The chemistry between the actors is also exceptional, with each character's relationship feeling authentic and heartfelt. The visual effects in Return of the King are also top-notch, with the landscapes of Middle-earth and the battle scenes all rendering with stunning detail and realism. The climactic Battle of Pelennor Fields is a particular standout, with its massive scale and intense action creating an unforgettable experience. But perhaps the greatest achievement of Return of the King is its storytelling. Because in Lord of the Rings, the visual effects are good, the acting is good, the everything in these movies are great, but the most fantastic, amazing thing is the storytelling. The film's themes of friendship, sacrifice, and the power of good over evil, like I explained in The Two Towers, are explored with a depth and richness that is rare in modern cinema. The emotional stakes of the story are raised to new heights as the fate of Middle-earth hangs in the balance, and the characters face seemingly insurmountable obstacles. Despite the epic scale of the film, it never loses sight of where the characters are at heart. The relationships between Frodo, Sam, Aragorn, Arwen, Merry, and Pippin all receive satisfying resolutions, bringing the story full circle and leaving audiences emotionally fulfilled, except Saruman. So yeah, Peter Jackson and Christopher Lee got into a fight after the production of The Two Towers, and we never see Saruman die in the theatrical cut of the Return of the King. The last time you see him theatrically, he's just like hiding in his apartment building. And like we do in every chapter, I need to talk about some of the music in this movie. God, I'm a broken record. Another standout of The Return of the King is its music. Howard Shore's score for this film is one of the greatest in history, featuring sweeping orchestral themes and the haunting vocals that perfectly capture the epic scale and emotional depth of the story. The use of leitmotifs, or musical themes associated with specific characters or story elements, adds a sense of cohesion and emotional resonance to the film, tying together the many different narrative threads in a way that is both powerful and memorable. The addition to its many technical and artistic achievements, The Return of the King is also notable for its ability to balance grand spectacle with intimate character moments. While the film features some of the most awe-inspiring battles ever put to film, it also takes the time to explore the inner lives of the characters, delving into their fears, doubts, and hopes for their future. This balance between spectacle and intimacy is what gives the film its emotional weight, and makes it such a rewarding viewing experience. The Return of the King is a film that manages to both honor its source material and stand on its own as a work of art. While fans of Tolkien's novels will appreciate the film's faithfulness to the source material, newcomers to the story will find much love in the film's compelling characters, stunning visuals, and thrilling action sequences. It is a film that has something good for everyone, whether you're a die-hard fantasy fan or simply someone who loves great cinema. Return of the King is a towering achievement in filmmaking, a cinematic masterpiece that brings to life one of the most beloved stories of all time in a way that is both faithful and innovative. With its unforgettable characters, stunning visuals, and powerful storytelling, it is a film that will continue to inspire and move audiences for years to come. Anyway, back to the payoff. The film is filled with numerous payoffs that not only reward longtime fans of the series, but provide a sense of closure and emotional catharsis for the characters in the story. One of the most significant payoffs in Return of the King is the resolution of Frodo's journey. Throughout the series, Frodo has carried the burden of the One Ring, which has taken a physical and emotional toll on him. The Return of the King delivers an emotional and cathartic payoff for Frodo's journey, when he finally destroys the ring, bringing an end to his quest and freeing him from its corrupting influence. The weight that has been put on Frodo's shoulders for the entire trilogy is lifted, and the character is allowed to find peace and closure. The film also provides satisfying resolutions to the character arcs of other major characters. Aragorn's journey from reluctant hero to true king is completed when he finally takes up the mantle of Gondor's throne. Sam's loyalty and devotion to Frodo are rewarded with the knowledge that he played a vital role in Frodo's success, and in a particularly emotional scene, the hobbits return home to this Shire, where they are finally able to relax and enjoy the peace they helped to secure. The Return of the King also features several epic and emotionally resonant moments that provide payoff for the story's many plot threads. The Battle of Pelennor Fields, which sees the good face-off against the armies of Mordor, is a massive and thrilling spectacle that delivers on the promise of the series' many earlier battles. The confrontation between Frodo and Gollum at the Crack of Doom is a tense and emotional payoff for their tumultuous relationship throughout the last two films. And the film's final scene, which is Frodo, Gandalf, and the other main characters sailing off into the west, it is a beautiful and poignant conclusion to their journeys. The many payoffs that the film provides make for an emotionally satisfying and deeply moving experience that will resonate with audiences for years to come. The Lord of the Rings trilogy as a whole is a testament to the power of storytelling, and The Return of the King is a worthy and unforgettable conclusion to this incredible cinematic achievement. Now for some criticism. One aspect of the film that has been widely criticized is the love triangle between Aragorn, Eowyn, and Arwen. While the film's portrayal of the love triangle is not necessarily bad, it's not particularly good either. And there are several reasons why. Firstly, the love triangle between Aragorn, Eowyn, and Arwen feels forced and unnecessary. It is introduced late in the film, and the audience is not given enough time to truly invest in these relationships before they are resolved. This lack of development makes it difficult to feel invested in the outcome of the love triangle, and ultimately feels like a distraction from the film's more significant themes and conflicts. Secondly, the love triangle does a disservice to the characters involved. Eowyn, in particular, is reduced to a one-dimensional love interest, despite being a strong and complex character in her own right. Her unrequited love for Aragorn is a cliché and unimaginative trope that does not do justice to her character or contributions to the story. Similarly, Arwen is also regulated to a passive role, waiting for Aragorn to return to her while she does little else. Finally, the love triangle feels out of place in a film that is primarily focused on the larger conflict between good and evil. While it is not uncommon for epic stories to include romantic subplots, the love triangle in Return of the King feels like an unnecessary distraction for the larger stakes in the story. In a film that is filled with powerful and emotional moments, the love triangle falls flat and fails to elicit the same level of emotional resonance. While Lord of the Rings Return of the King is an exceptional film, the love triangle is not one of its strengths. It feels forced, underdeveloped, and out of place, and does a disservice to the characters involved. While it may not be a significant flaw in an otherwise outstanding film, it is a notable misstep that detracts from the film's overall impact and emotional resonance. However, back to the good stuff, let's talk about the ending. The ending of Return of the King is a masterful culmination of one of the most epic cinematic journeys in history. It is a powerful and emotional conclusion to a story that has captivated audiences for generations. The ending of Return of the King is divided into several distinct parts, each of which provides a resolution to a different aspect of the story. The first part of the ending sees the victory celebration of the Battle of Pelennor Fields. The people of Gondor and Rohan come together to celebrate their hard-won victory over the forces of Mordor. This scene is a moment of relief and joy for the audience, who have invested so much in the characters and their struggles. The next part of the ending is the resolution of Frodo's journey. After his long and arduous quest to destroy the One Ring, Frodo is finally able to let go of his burden and find peace. The scene is one of the most emotional in the film, and it brings a sense of closure and catharsis to Frodo's story. Sam's unwavering loyalty to Frodo is also rewarded, and the two share a touching moment of friendship and respect. The third part of the ending sees the coronation of Aragorn as the King of Gondor. This scene is the culmination of Aragorn's character arc, as he finally accepts his destiny and takes up the mantle of leadership. This scene is not only a resolution for Aragorn, but provides closure for the people of Gondor, who have suffered under the rule of the Steward for years. The final part of the ending is the departure of the elves and Gandalf from Middle-earth. This scene is poignant and bittersweet, as the characters we have come to love and admire.
My friends.
You bow to no one.
Prepare to leave the world that they have fought so hard to protect. The final shot of Frodo, Gandalf, and the other main characters sailing off into the west is a beautiful and fitting conclusion to their stories. So, in conclusion, the ending of Lord of the Rings is a masterful conclusion to one of the greatest cinematic journeys of all time. The multiple parts of the ending provide resolution and closure to the many plot threads and character arcs, and powerful culmination of the story that has captivated audiences for generations, and it will continue to do so for many years to come. Well, that was a long section. Let's give it a rating and leave it alone. Despite my criticism, this movie is a resounding 10 out of 10. Well, the love triangle was added in by Peter Jackson, and I'm glad that Peter didn't add any more unnecessary shit that didn't need to be there. Well, would you look at that? We just finished Lord of the Rings, one of the greatest film trilogies ever made. Now we need to talk about The Hobbit. Before we get mad at these movies, we need to talk about the original reasons that these movies fell apart. Remember that the Lord of the Rings books are 576,459 words long. The Hobbit books are so much shorter and easier to read, with bigger words and fewer pages. The Godfather is 112,000 words long, and it is 1 3-hour movie. On the other hand, The Hobbit is 95,000 words. Okay, so you can do it in 2 movies, and that's what was originally going to happen with Guillermo del Toro as director. But then Peter Jackson was brought on as director and made the movies into Lord of the Rings, but with more bad effects and physics-breaking moments. However, the first movie isn't that bad. I don't really think it's that bad, but it does have issues. Whatever, man. This movie's pretty fun. Martin Freeman's performance in these movies is really fantastic and is a saving grace of these movies. I wish he was treated like a main character. We're gonna talk about the movie, but later, my favorite scene in the movie, because in all of the movies, the best scenes are just the scenes of Bilbo interacting with great actors in mocap. Anyway, let's get into it. An Unexpected Journey is a adventure film that tells the story of Bilbo Baggins, a hobbit who is recruited by a wizard named Gandalf to join a group of dwarves on the mission to reclaim their homeland from a dragon. While the film has many strengths, it also has some notable flaws that prevent it from being a truly great film. One of the main strengths of the film is its visual effects. The film's stunning landscapes and intricate sets create a vivid and immersive world that draws the audience into the story. The special effects used to create the various characters, the special effects used to create the various creatures and characters are also very impressive, with the highlight being the character Gollum, who is brought to life through mocap. Another strength of this film, as I previously mentioned, is its cast. Martin Freeman is perfectly cast as Bilbo Baggins, bringing both humor and heart to the character. Martin Freeman did such an incredible job bringing the character to the big screen, and has some of the snappiness I imagined Bilbo would have. Ian McKellen also delivers an excellent performance as Gandalf, and the supporting cast of dwarves is memorable and pretty well acted. This doesn't mean that I like the dwarves, we'll just talk about them later. However, the film also has some flaws. One of the most significant is the pacing of the story. The film is over 2.5 hours long, and it can feel slow and meandering at times. The film is, this is partly due to the decision to split the book into 3 films, which makes the narrative feel stretched thin in places. Another flaw of the film is the handling of some of the characters. While the dwarves are well realized and given distinct personalities for the most part, some of the other characters feel underdeveloped. The villainous Azog the Defiler, in particular, is given little depth or motivation, making him feel like a generic villain rather than a compelling antagonist. Azog and later Bolg feel so forced to give Thorin an impressive antagonist and a cool background. And also, Thorin is literally just Aragorn. Don't try to convince me that he's not. He and Keely are just not dwarves. And I'm also stupefied at how over 3 movies, they developed 2 of the dwarves. In Fellowship, we developed 9 characters in 1 movie, and in Unexpected Journey, they only develop Bilbo, Aragorn, Keely, and some Gandalf. It's just not the same level. In addition, the film's use of CGI can be distracting at times. Not the world around them, but the actual fight scenes and the giants seem a little bit too shiny. While the special effects are generally excellent, there are a few scenes where the use of CGI characters and creatures feels overly artificial, breaking the immersion of the film. As I previously mentioned, Gollum is epic and super well done, but there are just some moments in this movie where the other characters don't look good. But I'm just goofing, this movie's pretty good. The film action sequences are also a highlight. The battles between the dwarves and the goblins, as well as the confrontation between Bilbo and Gollum, are thrilling and well executed. The choreography and special effects are impressive, making these scenes stand out as some of the best parts in the film. Another strength of the film is its humor. The Hobbit and Unexpected Journey strikes a good balance between its serious and light-hearted moments, with the humor serving to break up the tension and add some levity to the story. The interactions between the dwarves and Bilbo in particular are often quite funny, providing a welcome respite from the more dramatic parts of the film. Finally, the film's score by Howard Shore is exceptional, as it always is. The music perfectly captures the mood and the tone of the film, with each theme and motif adding depth and emotion to the story. The score is a highlight of the film, enhancing the visual and emotional impact of each scene. I should mention, however, Howard Shore's tracks were often just reused from the original trilogy of films. In the standoff between Thorin and Azog, it uses the Ring Wraith theme. What the fuck? What even happened in this movie? I think I need to explain the story to understand why this film does what it does. The movie tells the story of Bilbo Baggins, a hobbit who is recruited by the wizard Gandalf to accompany a group of dwarves on a quest to reclaim their home Erebor from their dragon Smaug. Along the way, they face many challenges and obstacles, including hostile creatures, treacherous landscapes, and personal conflicts. Okay, we got that down. We know this. This film stars Martin Freeman as Bilbo Baggins, Ian McKellen as Gandalf, Richard Armitage as Thorin Oakenshield, the leader of the dwarves. Again, we know this. It features stunning visuals, thrilling action sequences, and a well-executed blend of drama and humor. Okay. That's what happened. Alright, whatever. Fine. Good movie. But let's talk about the best scene in that case. Riddles in the Dark is one of the most memorable and important sequences in the film, as it marks the first appearance of Gollum and the introduction of the One Ring. The scene is significant not only for its importance to the story, but also for its artful execution and demonstration of the relationship between Bilbo and Gollum. At the heart of the scene are the riddles themselves, which Bilbo and Gollum exchange in order to determine the outcome of their encounter. The riddles serve not only as a means of delaying the inevitable confrontation, but also as a way of revealing the personalities and intentions of the two characters. Each riddle offers a glimpse into the mind of the speaker, as well as an opportunity for the other character to gain insight into the situation. As the riddles progress, the tension of the scene increases, with the stakes growing higher and higher as the characters become more desperate to win. The game of riddles becomes a battle of wits, with Bilbo using his intelligence and wit to outmaneuver Gollum and gain an advantage. The scene showcases both the cleverness of Bilbo and the cunning of Gollum, setting the stage for their future interactions throughout the series. Furthermore, the Riddles in the Dark scene is notable for its visual and technical aspects. The use of lighting, sound, and camera work creates a tense and claustrophobic experience, emphasizing that the darkness and danger of the cave in which the scene takes place. The interplay between the two characters is captured with precision and skill, highlighting the contrast between Bilbo's plucky nature and Gollum's more sinister presence. And now let's finish the second section with some flaws. An Unexpected Journey, while a visually stunning and entertaining film, does have some notable flaws that detract from the quality. Some of the flaws include pacing issues. This film suffers from pacing issues, with some of the scenes feeling drawn out and slow, while others rushed and underdeveloped. The film's runtime of almost 3 hours is a bit excessive, making it difficult for some viewers to maintain their interest. Over-reliance on CGI. While the film's visual effects are impressive, it relies too heavily on CGI, resulting in a lack of realism and immersion. Many of the creatures in the environments feel too artificial, which can be distracting and take the viewer out of the story. Lack of character development. This film introduces a large number of characters, but fails to develop many of them. The dwarves in particular feel somewhat one-dimensional and underdeveloped, making it difficult for the viewer to become fully invested in their journey. Departure from the source material. The film takes several liberties with the source material, which may disappoint fans of the original book. While some changes are necessary for the adaptation to work as a film, some changes feel unnecessary or detrimental to the story. Also, unnecessary subplots. This film includes several subplots that feel extraneous and unnecessary, such as the addition of the character Azog the Defiler, who serves a primary antagonist in the film, but does not play a major role in the original book. Despite these flaws, The Hobbit: An Unexpected Journey still manages to be an enjoyable and visually impressive film. While it may not be perfect, it offers a satisfying return to the world of Middle-earth, and sets a stage for the two next films in the trilogy. So yeah, I guess I'll give it a 7.5 out of 10. It's pretty good in general, and it isn't a pain in the ass to watch. So let's move on to the ones that are. So yeah, this movie isn't very good. Everybody knows that the movies that follow an unexpected journey kind of fell off, and I really wasn't expecting such an unexpected drop of quality. I was watching the barrel sequence, looking back on my childhood, and saying, Jesus Christ, what did I like about these movies? Desolation of Smaug is not very good. It isn't the worst one, but it is very low down on this list. But to truly understand the issue with these movies, you need to understand the differences of how they work. The Hobbit is a whimsical and fun little adventure about a middle-aged hobbit who wants more excitement in his life. It's not as long as some other books, and it serves a story that you read to your kid before bed. I can't stress enough that the studio needed another Lord of the Rings, so the studio brought Peter Jackson on to make the prequel to Lord of the Rings, not The Hobbit. These movies are gray, dark, and story-based. That's Lord of the Rings, and if they were to make movies like Lord of the Rings, they wouldn't be allowed to break the physics or use power that shouldn't be there in this grounded story, or have some form of humor, or make their characters immortal, or have because that is what The Hobbit could have been, versus what we got, which is Lord of the Rings. This story doesn't expand on Middle-earth either. In this movie, we see Mirkwood Forest and Lake Town and the Desolation of Smaug, and all the things we haven't heard about before. We even seen Sauron. Wait, what the fuck? Alright, so what's, the bad things? Firstly, this film suffers from pacing issues. At nearly 3 hours long, it feels bloated and overstuffed with subplots and unnecessary action sequences. This makes the film feel drawn out and tedious, which can be difficult for viewers to maintain their interest in. Secondly, the film, again, relies too heavily on CGI and action sequences at the expense of character development and storytelling. While the action sequences are impressive, they lack weight and consequence due to the excessive use of computer-generated effects and immortal characters. While the action sequences... Wait, hang on. Additionally, the characters are often left feeling one-dimensional and underdeveloped, making it difficult for the viewer to become fully invested in their journey. Thirdly, the film takes several liberties with the source materials, which may disappoint some fans of the original book. While some changes are necessary for this adaptation to work as a film, some changes feel unnecessary or even detrimental to the story. For example, the addition of the character Tauriel, a female elf, and her romantic subplot with the dwarf Keeley, I know, feels forced and does not add to the story in any meaningful way. Lastly, the film suffers from a lack of narrative cohesion. It feels disjointed and inconsistent in its pacing and storytelling, making it difficult to follow the plot and keep track of the various characters and subplots. While the Desolation of Smaug has its strengths, it ultimately fails to live up to the high standards set by its predecessors in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. The film suffers from pacing issues, CGI, and a lack of character development, departures from the source material, and a lack of narrative cohesion, and as a result, it can be argued that The Desolation of Smaug is a bad movie, and a disappointing follow-up to The Hobbit, and difficult for the viewer to become fully invested in the rest of Bilbo's journey, and detracts it from the emotional impact. Overall, while Desolation is not without its merits, it can be argued that it is a bad movie due to its numerous flaws. But the real underlying issue can be found in the barrel sequence. The barrel scene from Desolation is often cited as one of the film's most memorable and exciting sequences. However, upon closer inspection, it becomes apparent that this scene is riddled with flaws and inconsistencies that detract from its overall quality. First and foremost, the sequence is overly long and drawn out. While the initial idea of the dwarves and Bilbo escaping barrels down the river is an interesting one, the scene drags on for far too long with numerous repetitive action sequences that add little to the narrative. Additionally, the scene is overly reliant on CGI, with many of the more visually impressive moments feeling artificial and disconnected from the story. This overuse of special effects sometimes undermines the emotional impact of the scene, or supposedly, making it feel like more of a video game cutscene than a compelling cinematic moment. Furthermore, the scene is marked by numerous implausibilities and inconsistencies. For example, the dwarves and Bilbo are able to survive numerous waterfalls and rapids with little to no injury or damage to their makeshift rafts. Similarly, they're able to fight off a group of pursuing orcs and elves with little difficulty despite being outnumbered and outmatched. Finally, the scene suffers from a lack of narrative cohesion, with its placement within the larger story feeling arbitrary and disconnected. It's not clear how the events of the barrel scene contribute to the plot or character arcs, making it feel more like a gratuitous action set piece than an essential part of the story. One of the most significant issues with the barrel scene is its portrayal of the orcs and elves. In the scene, both groups are presented as cartoonishly villainous, with little to no nuance or depth to their characters. This oversimplification undermines the film's attempt at world building and character development, as the viewer is unable to fully engage or empathize with either group. Additionally, the scene suffers from poor pacing and structure. While there are some visually impressive moments, such as the dwarves leaping from one barrel to another, these moments are few and far between, with much of the scene consisting of repetitive and uninteresting action sequences. Furthermore, the scene raises numerous logistical questions that are never adequately addressed. For example, it's unclear how the dwarves and Bilbo are able to breathe while inside the barrels, or how they are able to navigate the river with such precision despite being enclosed in the barrels. Finally, the barrel scene can be seen as emblematic of the larger issues with the Hobbit trilogy as a whole. The scene is visually impressive and entertaining, but lacks the emotional depth, narrative coherence, and thematic resonance of its predecessor, Lord of the Rings. In attempting to recreate the sets of the earlier films, The Hobbit falls short, relying too heavily on spectacle and action at the expense of the character development and storytelling. Overall, while the barrel scene from The Hobbit is memorable and entertaining in the moment, it is ultimately flawed and inconsistent, and it highlights many issues within the film franchise as a whole. However, there is one scene that makes the entire movie a better watching experience, and that's when Bilbo interacts with Smaug. The conversation between Bilbo and Smaug in The Hobbit is a standout scene in the film, and one that exemplifies the strengths of the franchise. The scene is a masterclass in tension and suspense, as the viewer is drawn to the verbal sparring between the two characters, unsure of who will emerge victorious, or moreover, who is going to get hurt. We know Bilbo won't die, but who is going to get damaged from it? First and foremost, the scene benefits from the exceptional performances of Martin Freeman and Benedict Cumberbatch. Freeman brings a sense of vulnerability and wit to Bilbo, while Cumberbatch imbues Smaug with a sense of menace and cunning. Their interactions are electric, with each character pushing each other to the limits of a battle of wits and wills. Furthermore, the scene is visually stunning, with the shimmering gold of Smaug's lair and the dragon's massive frame creating an imposing and memorable backdrop for the conversation. The use of lighting and camera angles also adds to the sense of tension, as Bilbo attempts to evade Smaug's gaze and avoid detection. Additionally, the conversation between Bilbo and Smaug is a key moment in the larger narrative of the Hobbit trilogy. It sets up the climactic confrontation between the dwarves and Smaug, and adds depth and complexity to both characters. Through their verbal sparring, the viewer gains insight to Bilbo's courage and cunning, as well as Smaug's arrogance and greed. Finally, the scene highlights the strengths of Peter Jackson's approach to the material. By emphasizing character development and emotional resonance over spectacle and action like they did do in the barrel sequence, Jackson is able to create a scene that is both thrilling and meaningful, with a lasting impact on the story and characters. So yeah, I've been talking about the movie for a while now, so let's wrap it up. The Desolation of Smaug had a stunning amount of potential, if not for the plot holes, unnecessary love triangles, and overall bucket loads of shit that didn't need to be there. The one entertaining in the sequence doesn't show up until the final 20 minutes of the movie, and it devolves into a bad CGI action set piece. 5 out of 10. I missed the other ones. This movie makes me feel dead inside. Okay, so the movie starts pretty well with Smaug's death and the destruction of Lake Town, but the movie takes such a swift turn down. So check this out. The quote-unquote main character of our series gets sidelined until the final few minutes of the movie. My favorite scenes in the movie is when Bilbo talks. Fucking Alfred has more screen time and more lines than Bilbo in this movie, as well as all of the dwarves. Bilbo doesn't even get to have his emotional scene in the end because of this stupid love triangle that I don't give a single shit about. The battle's cool, I guess. This shit barely comes up to the level of Helm's Deep because it forgot how they won the battle. Aragorn and company earned their win, and in this movie, hang on, I forgot. All the battles are super forgettable, and I just remember the stupid shit because it makes me feel something. So, what did I like in this movie? Well, I like that scene where Thorin recognizes his errors and goes out and fights the war. I like that final talk between Thorin and Bilbo. I like the acorn. I like when Bilbo goes home. Hey, are we noticing a pattern here? The only good things in this movie are when Bilbo and Thorin do things, and they barely do anything throughout the movie. Alright, let's get back to the shit I hate. It's time to tackle, or just attack, the stupid love triangle. Let's stop being stupid and petty and have an actual conversation. Back to talking about the movie, I think the movie is bloated and unnecessary as an addition to the franchise, filled with gratuitous action sequences and a poorly developed plot that is impossible to follow. First and foremost, the film suffers from a lack of focus and direction. It is clear that the filmmakers were attempting to capitalize on the success of the previous films, but they failed to come up with a coherent narrative that ties the stories together. As a result, the film feels like a disjointed mess, with no clear beginning, middle, or end. Furthermore, the action sequences are overblown and ridiculous, with characters performing incredible feats that defy logic and physics. The battle scenes, which should have been the highlight of the film, are instead tedious and repetitive, with no real stakes or emotional investment. The characters, who were once the heart and the soul of the franchise, are reduced to mere caricatures of themselves. Once endearing Bilbo is reduced to a mere spectator, with little to no agency or impact on the story. The other characters, including the dwarves, are given no real development or personality, and are instead used as cannon fodder in the endless battles. Moreover, the film suffers from a severe lack of pacing. It takes far too long to get to the action, and when it does, it feels rushed and incomplete. The film tries to cram too much into its runtime, leaving no room for proper development or resolution. Finally, the film's ending is a slap in the face to the fans of the franchise. It is rushed, unsatisfying, and fails to provide any closure to the storylines. It feels like a cheap way to end the film, with no real thought or consideration to the audience. Alfred, a cowardly servant of the Master of Lake Town, is another pointless addition, serving only to add some poorly executed comic relief. Additionally, the film fails to provide any real sense of danger or stakes for the characters. The battle scenes, which should have been the highlight of the film, feel like a mere exercise in CGI, with no real consequences for the characters. The lack of emotional investment in the characters makes it feel difficult for the audience to care about their fates. Furthermore, the film suffers from a lack of creativity and originality. Many of the battle scenes and set pieces are lifted directly from Lord of the Rings, making the film feel like a cheap imitation of its predecessor. The film also fails to capture the sense of wonder and magic that made Lord of the Rings films so memorable. Finally, the film suffers from poor storytelling and pacing. The plot is disjointed and difficult to follow, with no clear sense of direction or purpose. The film's pacing is also off, with long stretches of boring exposition and action scenes that are either too short or too long. The decision to turn The Hobbit into a trilogy of films has been a point of contention among fans and critics alike. Many argue that the story of The Hobbit did not warrant full 3-length films, and that decision to stretch out the material resulted in the unnecessary padding and subplots that detracted from the main story. One of the main arguments for why The Hobbit should have been in 2 parts is the pacing of the films. The first film, Unexpected Journey, was criticized for its slow pacing and lack of action, while the second and third films, The Desolation of Smaug and The Battle of Five Armies, were criticized for their frenetic pacing and lack of focus. By condensing the story into 2 films, the pacing could have been more consistent, allowing for a better flow of the story and more satisfying viewing experience. Another argument for why The Hobbit should have been in 2 parts is the lack of material in the original novel. The Hobbit is a much shorter and simpler story than The Lord of the Rings, and while there are some additional materials and appendices that expand on the world, there simply wasn't enough material to sustain a trilogy of films. By condensing the story into 2 films, the filmmakers could have focused on the essential elements of the story without having to rely on filler material or unnecessary subplots. Finally, many argue that by stretching the story out into 3 films, the filmmakers compromised the integrity of the story and the characters. The addition of new characters and subplots feel forced and out of place, and the focus on action and spectacle came at the expense of character development and emotional resonance. By condensing the story into 2 films, the filmmakers could have stayed truer to the spirit of the original story and characters, creating a more satisfying and cohesive narrative. However, despite the success of Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit failed to live up to the expectations, and many fans and critics were left feeling disappointed. Furthermore, let's explain some of the reasons that the trilogy failed. For one, they stretched the material too thin. The decision to turn a relatively short novel into 3 full-length films was the biggest mistake made by the filmmakers. Unlike The Lord of the Rings, which had a wealth of source material to draw from, The Hobbit had much less to work with. This resulted in the filmmakers adding new characters and subplots that felt forced and unnecessary, and detracted from the main story. Another reason is the lack of character development. One of the strengths of the Lord of the Rings trilogy was the development of its characters. Each of the main characters had a well-defined arc and went through significant changes over the course of the 3 films. In contrast, the characters in the Hobbit trilogy were underdeveloped and lacked depth. The love triangle between Tauriel, Legolas, and Keeley was particularly poorly received, as it felt like a cheap attempt to add romance to the story. Again, over-reliance on CGI is another issue. Lord of the Rings is praised for its groundbreaking use of practical effects and makeup, which give the films a sense of authenticity and realism. In contrast, The Hobbit relied heavily on CGI, resulting in a less immersive and less believable world. The overuse of CGI resulted in action scenes that felt overblown and cartoonish, which detracted from the tension and the drama. Also, the inconsistent tone. The Hobbit trilogy struggled to find a consistent tone, which resulted in a lack of coherence and direction. The first film, An Unexpected Journey, had a whimsical fairy tale-like tone that felt out of place in a story which would become more serious and more epic. The second and the third films, in contrast, were darker and more action-packed, which felt jarring and inconsistent with the tone of the first film. In conclusion, the Hobbit trilogy failed to live up to the expectations due to a combination of factors. The decision to stretch the material thin, the lack of character development, and the over-reliance on CGI and the inconsistent tone all contributed to a less satisfying and less cohesive story. While the trilogy was a financial success, it failed to capture the same magic and critical acclaim as the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and ultimately left fans feeling disappointed. Well, in that case, the movie is really tough to watch, and the last 2 movies left me drained, so I'm gonna give this a 3.5 out of 10. Okay, welcome to my ranking of all 6 Lord of the Rings movies. Now, yeah, this is a very short video, and the way that, I'm gonna handle that is the fact that I've already posted 6 reviews on the Lord of the Rings. So, if you want my personalized opinions on all of those videos, just go back to my channel, and the videos will be right there. So, without further ado, enjoy. In the end, the movies are kind of fun to watch every time. The movies are pretty cool, and I love the world of Middle-earth, so let's rank it. 6th place, The Battle of Five Armies. I actively hate this movie, and it feels like a cheap attempt at the return to the greatest film trilogy of all time. The rest of the films are fine, but this movie really makes me mad with how much disrespect to the original works there are, and that's the same situation with the Rings of Power. But this movie is literally dramatizing a children's bedtime story, but they can't even make it a fun and enjoyable experience. 5th place, The Desolation of Smaug. This movie is not as unbearable as the Battle of the Five Armies because it has some enjoyable scenes, like the Smaug encounter, which I failed to mention, is that the Smaug encounter becomes one of the worst action set pieces that I have ever seen. This movie is just not that good. I really think it had potential, and that potential was just wasted on needless shit, and I think that this movie just makes a bad point about Middle-earth. 4th place, An Unexpected Journey. This movie is good. I like it. It sticks the landing, but it set up so much stuff to be put in the future movies. But the thing is, its connection to the future movies just did not bode well for me. I really like this movie, but the rest of the Hobbit trilogy just brings it down a bit. 3rd place, The Two Towers. This movie is fantastic. I really have to say that watching these movies has been a really good experience, and The Two Towers is so entertaining that I cannot just say how nice it is in retrospective of the Hobbit trilogy. The thing is, this movie is just fantastic bit after fantastic bit, and it has to sit right up there on my Letterboxd top 30. 2nd place, Fellowship of the Ring. I love this movie. It feels like so long ago that a movie has actually come out as good as this, and it's not only one of the greatest fantasy movies ever, but one of the greatest movies of all time regardless. 1st place, The Return of the King. What can I say? This movie is so incredible that I have to put it in my Letterboxd top 15, and that is the greatest honor I can bestow upon a film. The greatest part about this movie is how jaw-droppingly beautiful, metaphorical, and the amount of payoff is so large. I love this movie, and I can't say that I've seen a movie of this scale since. I love it. And congrats on winning Best Picture and everything else. Well guys, I guess that's it. This is a very long YouTube video, and I just can't wait for the Supreme Court to decide that the internet is whack on June 30th. In any case, I hope you enjoyed it. I spent days on trying to put this video up, and months of production went in, so if you could please support me by dropping a subscription, that would be great. So, yeah, thank you all very much, and have a good afternoon, good evening, and good night.